It's a distinguished panel. The focus of our Symposium roundtable is the book Crucifixion. And the framework is that there are no issues or topics barred from discussion. As always, we all implicitly respectful of everybody, and the audience watching the tape should take it in that context. We're all coming from a position of peace, harmony, and please always take that as a given. Would anyone like to start off with a point or a question posed to the panel? This is really a freewheeling discussion. Dr. Garin or Dr. Chilton or Dr. Edelheit?
I would, as a point of information, I would say this is one of the easiest hard reads I've ever had. It's a hard read because of the content. It's an easy read because of the way the book is organized and written. But that is a very big plus as a instructor at a community college. It's very important to have books like this that are jargon-free and easily laid out, logically laid out.
One of the reasons I wrote, I say that I've written a few books. I say any book I write, the main criteria should be a book missing to my children's library. And if it fits my other criteria, but it also fits that criteria, then I engage in these projects, because as we all know, these are multi-year projects. I did go through the yeshiva day school system through 8th grade and then through high school. I was a year at Yeshiva University before CCNY engineering. I didn't have a book like this to read. That's number one. And as I was telling Dr. Chilton, Dr. Garin, Jewish history is a dicey subject to write about because you often end up writing about 20 centuries of persecution, which is a little deadening after the first chapter. Not only that, at the risk of generalizing, it's often a similar template repeating itself time after time. So, and in today's society, people do want an interesting read, no matter what it is. There's no time for anything else.
I would just actually second Dr. Edelheit's remarks. One of my daughters is in high school, and to my great disappointment, she's a mathematician. She's not interested in history. But when I was reading the book, I prepared this, and she was with me, and I showed it to her. She was actually quite enthused about the way everything was presented. The way, unfortunately, it's not presented in the school she's currently attending.
Right.
But it is very accessible, very readable, and the sidebars and the greater context in which everything is set gives it a tremendous readability and very informative.
Okay, fair enough. So let me ask you,
as well, it's obviously a very important topic. As you said, we're coming to this from the perspective of mutual respect and peace and everything.
Right.
This is, I think, one of the Ur topics floating around in the atmosphere right now: Jewish-Christian relations.
what if I asked you? You've looked at the book. On any of the topics, would any of you like to make, like to focus on any of the topics in the book, in particular, for starters, a topic that hit you strongly, or a topic that you thought was electric, because the book covers numerous topics, as we know. Anyone want to throw something out on the table for discussion?
I guess I found most interesting the chapter on the transition period, on the trial,
right.
However you want to formulate it.
Right.
There was a valid trial and everything,
Right.
and the sources of really the introductory essence of the first meeting between Jews and Christians,
Right.
and how that, to an extent, resonates and continues to play out throughout the rest of the first 1,300 years, I guess.
Right. Let me ask you a question. In my research, to my amazement, there was significant buttress to the position that Jesus was Orthodox Jewish. And I'd always thought it was a very minority position, but it seems to be an emerging academic position. How do you react to the few different sides of that coin? That it seems, first the position itself, and that it seems to be an evolving academic position, not evolving rabbinic position.
No.
What was your sort of emotional?
It is, as you say, an emerging position,
Right.
but not yet dominant.
Right.
Now it should be dominant.
Okay.
I wrote a book in 2000 named Rabbi Jesus, earning me an extraordinary range of reviews, shall we say.
Okay.
Even people who are experienced in the field said to me, subsequent to publication, why did you decide to call him rabbi?
Right.
Proving they had not read the first footnote in the book.
Right.
Because the first footnote in the book explains that the term rabbi, transliterated, not translated, is used more frequently of Jesus than any other title. More than Son of God, more than Messiah, more than prophet. It's quite clear, not only do his followers refer to him as rabbi, but people who disagree with him do as well.
Uh-huh.
So I was delighted, naturally,
Right.
to see precisely that
Right.
portrait picked up in the book, because as it happens,
Right.
we're dealing, although indirectly in the Gospels, with evidence, we are nonetheless dealing with positive evidence of how he was viewed within his time.
Isn't this a staggering situation? Isn't it a staggering development?
Well, I think, as mentioned before, we got together, everyone seems to interpret or read whatever they think the text is through the prism of their own interests and their own orientation. And so, looking at this, I guess I read it through the context of two articles I published, one on Rabbi Soloveitchik's Usha Halacha, Halachic Man, and one was coming out later on this year on Replicage History of the Holocaust, on spiritual resistance to the Holocaust. And the thread that I saw all the way through, and it relates to this whole issue of Jesus as rabbi, is, as you mentioned, the inversion of Jesus from a Pharisee to a Sadducee. Why is that important? Because in early Christianity, you find that the first adherents really were still very much practicing Jews, which really angered and bothered some of the early church fathers, Chrysostom, Jerome, Ambrose, and so on. And as you go on in history, you find that this sort of, for lack of a better word, antinomianism that characterizes the further development of Christianity has other permutations later on. For example, you mentioned quite correctly various Talmud burnings in the Middle Ages and so on. That's the Talmud as sort of a symbol of the legal, rational ethos of Judaism. And it goes so far into the 20th century that during the period of Nazi occupation of Poland, the religious, scholarly, rabbinic types were referred to derogatorily by the Nazis as Talmud-Juden. Again, because they somehow embodied or personified this legal, rational ethos of Judaism. And the fact is that Nazism, which was basically a pagan rite, also, I guess, rejected the rational basis or the legalistic foundation of Judaism and was not acceptable to them. I think clearly, there's a racial aspect to Nazism that's central, but I think there's also an ideological one. And I think that Judaism flies in the face of the mystical, otherworldly orientation of Nazism, and earlier on, some of the more mystical, otherworldly orientations and philosophies or ideologies of Christianity.
Well, let's just the takeaways. Let's define the issue of the morphing in the, what I assert to be the morphing in the New Testament of Jesus from bona fide Pharisee to allegedly anti-Pharisee. Does anyone can you just define that for the audience?
Well, I think that if you define Pharisee as a rabbinic establishment, the idea of removing Jesus from that context and, so to speak, defrocking him in that sense, and to constantly move forward in attacking and undermining or negating the legal
Rabbinic
Judaism.
Positions him as not enough.
Right,
correct.
And obviously fit in very nicely, dovetail with his reduction to a Sadducee who rejects rabbinic law.
On the other hand, there is clear evidence that what rabbinic Judaism was still also in a state of flux.
Right, for sure, right. We don't even
This
know.
is a very important observation, I
Right,
think.
right,
I think
right.
there's a tendency to confuse Orthodox Judaism with Pharisaic Judaism. It's not clear that Judaism in the first century could take any definition that would be agreed as being Orthodox. You have competing
Luckily,
orthodoxies.
Right.
It's quite clear, I think, as you rightly say, that Jesus is tightly associated with the
Right.
Pharisaic movement. At one point, you referred to him as a neo-Pharisee.
Right, right.
And
That's the best I could do.
That's, I think, a nice qualification
Right.
because it avoids putting him too firmly in a camp
Right.
which had more to do with Jerusalem than Galilee anyhow. And it also suggests that he's got a serious argument with many of the Pharisees of his time, which is not exactly out of the ordinary for a Pharisee, as the Talmud would indicate.
Right.
But I think it is clear that in his dispute with others in regard to what the source of purity is, Jesus is perceived as belonging within that Pharisaic milieu. So the question is, why does the New Testament turn this around and make the Pharisees into the obvious fall guys of the Gospels? To some extent, I think that happens because the Gospels, written a good generation after the time of Jesus, see Pharisaic, rabbinic Judaism emerging. That's their principal competitor. They would prefer the Romans to turn against the Pharisees than to turn against them. So there is a sociological tendency, from the point of view of competition, to try to put the Pharisees in a bad light. But there's also an internal Christian reason for this. Group is described in the book of Acts as being Pharisees who believed. That is, who believed in Jesus. They were the group who insisted that, quite rationally, the whole covenant had to be kept.